everybody, can we get a sweep going? Shoulda, coulda, woulda. I'm just drinking a cup of Blossom coffee from that $4,000 coffee machine, and it is awesome. That is delightful. All right, we're 2.5 days in, and we're going to make it to the end. It's going to be epic. We're going to have all the winners coming up after the grand jury deliberates later. And we've got this afternoon, let me take a look here, one alumni update from Space Monkey, which won last year. Clint's going to show us what they're up to. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 more companies in competition, and 5 people from the demo pit. So you can have 13 demos, 9 minutes each or so, all in with a Q&A. So it's going to be very efficient. And then the grand jury will go backstage, deliberate the winners and the prizes, and in the back of the room will be a bar with alcohol, and you're all going to get to drink it, so that'll be good. God, I could use it. I'm barely standing right now. Thanks to our sponsors, Treehouse, Screendate, and WebConnects. Big thank you to these 3 sponsors. Big round of applause. Oh, you guys still have some energy. Awesome. Hands down, without question, the biggest success in the history of the event in the past 6 years now has been Yammer. They launched on stage here just under 4 years ago, and the founder told me in the rehearsals that he was going to win, and that his team had set their sights on winning. And he was, at that time, a very successful executive, but he took the competition seriously. He put serious effort into it. He inspired his team to greatness, and they did win. And of course, a couple years later, they wound up winning, amazing traction in the market. And it was just a fantastic, fantastic ride and excellent to see. So please welcome David Sachs of Yammer.
All righty.
See you.
Hey, good to see you.
You're back on the stage.
Yep.
And I think you remember this stage.
I remember it very well. You're right. It was.
You remember the room. This is the room.
This is the room. Yes, exactly. We actually launched on stage. We did like a countdown and we pressed the button and the site went up, and that was September 2008. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
And we're sitting here 5 years later.
Yeah.
And the company's been sold. How do you reconcile this, let's go through it, the actual 5 years of, Yammer's existence and now to this tremendous exit to Microsoft. I think the numbers are public now, $1.2 or $3 billion exit. Right. People were extremely critical of it when you launched. There was people who, on the judging panel,
right, dismissed
you.
Right.
Just like we saw today, people here getting creamed on the panel, panelists saying, hey, it's not going to work, it's too simple, whatever. Mm-hmm. Do you remember the reaction of the judges?
It was pretty mixed. Probably the judge, there's only one judge I remember being really enthusiastic about the idea, and that was Mark Benioff, to his credit. And then he became a competitor. So he
launched Chatter.
Yeah, that was less fun.
He was a really big
yeah, he was a really big fan.
So much so he copied it pixel for pixel.
Yeah, but no, he was one of the first people to see that social wasn't going to be limited to the consumer space, that it was going to want to come inside the enterprise as well as a business solution. And that's what Yammer was trying to do. And I think the reason why people were dismissive of it is they thought that social networking was just a plaything, a toy. It was just for people's personal lives. What did you have for lunch? It's sort of personal news. And our view was that it was a form of communication and that it could be harnessed for business productivity. And so that was a really simple idea, but people were, very dismissive of it at the time.
And as an entrepreneur, when you got that sort of mixed to lukewarm at times reception, did that impact you and make you think for a moment, hey, maybe, these are judges, they've had some success, my vision is off? And how did you fight through that?
Well, as a result of the conference, we got 50,000 users and 10,000 company networks in 1 week. So we felt like the launch had been a tremendous success. And then, by the way, we won the event. So
yes.
Enough people liked it that that we felt really good about it. And so, you don't really worry about the naysayers. You worry about, are there people who see what you're trying to do and appreciate it? And we had enough of those that we felt really good about it.
Now, people, I think, don't know this today, but Yammer was not the first idea of the company. There was a product that came before Yammer, and you pivoted into Yammer. Tell that story.
Right. So you're referring to Genie,
Right.
which was creating a virally growing family tree, and the idea was to layer a family social network on top of it. And actually, we sold Genie last year to MyHeritage, so it's still a product that I love and believe in. But essentially, what happened is that when we launched Genie, one of the first things people said to us is, the virally growing family tree is a really cool idea. Could you do that with an org chart? Could you create a virally growing org chart? And that planted a seed, and it got me thinking about, well, this family social networking is pretty interesting, but would corporate social networking be an even better idea? And so that idea started to kind of percolate, and it kind of came together really throughout 2007. And by January 2008, we were actively coding it, and then we launched in September of that year.
And when you get off the stage and you've gotten all the kudos, what happens then? Did you have a ton of interest from venture capitalists? You already had financed the company pretty heavily from, I guess, Charles River Ventures. And was there another investor early on?
A Founders Fund and Charles River had invested in Genie. And one of the things that happened is we started Genie in the middle of 2006. We launched it in January 2007. By the end of 2008, we were in the middle of the financial crisis, and raising money was really hard. And I'm not sure that without winning the conference that, we ultimately got the fundraising done, and what happened is that Charles River essentially doubled down on us, and so they had a lot of conviction, and George Zachary, who's the VC there who was on our board, he was always very positive about this idea and very enthusiastic. But we went out and kind of tested the market, and it was a really hard time to raise money. I think if George hadn't stepped up and Founders Fund hadn't participated as well, it would have been hard, I think, to get this off the ground.
So it could have not happened.
It could have not happened, for sure.
Wow. And what do you take away from that as an entrepreneur? What's the lesson there?
There's nothing you can do about the fundraising environment. George has compared it to sunshine. You make hay while the sun shines. I tend to think that entrepreneurs raise money while you can, because you can't control the macro environment. And, under normal circumstances, I think, Yammer shouldn't have had trouble getting finance, given that it had won this event, and enough people liked the idea, and it had some good early traction. But you don't want to get caught in a situation where there's like a recession or something, and all of a sudden you can't raise money. So take the money while you can.
Yeah, and you get off stage, and then the hard work begins. Mm-hmm. You've got some users. What were the next 3 or 4 years about, leading up until, this tremendous, I remember at some point, you and I were driving in a car somewhere, and you said, yeah, we made $1 million this quarter. And then we were driving in a car 6 months later, and you said, yeah, we made $3 million this quarter.
Right.
And it was only within a couple of months of each other. And
right.
You were kind of in shock about how the revenue had ramped up. What was the
right.
revenue ramp up, and how did you actually get that? Because today we heard a
right.
lot of people saying, how are you going to make money to companies just like yours when you launched? And what was your focus, and how did you get that revenue?
Yeah. So I'd say the biggest area where we had to learn over that 3-year time period was enterprise sales. I didn't really know anything about it. My background's more in product development, and so we had to learn how to do enterprise sales. When we started the company, we had this somewhat naive view that if we just went viral, that companies would pull out their credit card and buy it. And that works for small businesses, it works for individuals. It does not work for enterprises. And it turns out that, and again, this was something that was a little bit surprising to us, is that enterprises were the ones who responded to Yammer the most. Because if you've got, it stands to reason, if you've got thousands of employees, you've got the biggest need for an internal company social network. You've got the biggest sort of internal communication problems. So we had to learn how to do enterprise sales is a short answer to that.
How did the Microsoft exit come about? I mean, I'm assuming a company that was on that incredible run rate like you were at this moment in time when enterprise and bottom-up enterprise has become so huge, must have had offers beforehand. What were the offers like leading up to Microsoft? When was the first time you got an offer? You don't have to say from whom, but...
Yeah, I mean, there were always some people who were kind of circling around and kind of sniffing around, and you know, it just never kind of materialized. You know, we were pretty heads down, focused on the company, and we weren't looking to be acquired. I mean, that's really the key thing, is that we never did anything to generate any interest or to shop the company or anything like that. When Microsoft came to us, you know, we had never really talked to them before. They came to us because of what they saw us doing in the market. And, you know, I'm not the first one to say it, but I believe that companies are bought, not sold. I generally don't think you get a good exit if you're out there trying to sell yourself. I think what has to happen is you're doing something interesting enough in the market that people come to you.
What was that Microsoft saw in the market? Were their own clients using the product? Was there something in your product that they felt would be disruptive to their existing businesses? What do you perceive to be that thing that made them notice you?
Well, I think it started with the feedback they were getting from our mutual customers. So Microsoft's in virtually every enterprise, and all of a sudden they see Yammer exploding in a lot of their customers, and they're hearing really good things from those customers about the tool. And then, you know, Yammer represented a few themes that I think are really important to Microsoft: the consumerization of IT, the viral freemium model, moving to the cloud, you know, bringing social into the workplace. Those are all themes of, you know, intense interest to Microsoft right now.
And during that time, you had raised a lot of money. There was, I think, 2 or 3 rounds of financing.
I think it was like 5, probably. We raised $142 million over...
In 4 years?
Basically in 3.5 years. So right after the launch conference, we raised that first round from George. That was $5 million. Then the next round was a year later that we raised $10 million from Emergence Capital, who are kind of specialists in enterprise SaaS. And then we raised 25 million like the next year from Mamoon Hamid, who was at USVP, and then later joined Chamath, and then Chamath put in another 15.
So wait. Mamoon,
Yeah.
who was at USVP, invested
Right.
at USVP.
Right.
He left to join Chamath at Social Capital Partnership, and he then invested as...
Yeah, they topped off kind of.
Wow.
And
I mean, that's a big... I guess that's very complimentary of you as an entrepreneur, that somebody moves from one VC firm to another and says, we got to invest again at a higher valuation and,
Right.
you know, get in here.
Yeah, so I mean, like our board members were happy. They were seeing good things from the inside, and you know, I think the ones who did the best were the ones who kept doubling down. And then, you know, the final round was 3 months before the Microsoft deal. We raised $85 million, and that was the first round where I would say it got kind of easy to raise money. But honestly, prior to that, we never had more than 1 or 2 term sheets per round. You know, I give our VCs a lot of credit for, you know, believing in what we were trying to do, because, you know, we had some proof, but it's not like it was, you know, obvious to everybody else until basically last year.
The people who put money in last, they then saw you sell the company 3 months later.
Right.
What kind of return did those people get in 90 days?
Well, they more than doubled their money in 90 days, so they were all pretty happy. On an IRR basis, that's probably like the best anyone's ever going to do.
100% in 3 months would be 400% in a year.
Yeah, I mean, it was even a little bit more. It was like 120% or something like that.
Right, so 500% a year
Yeah.
would be the, if you could ever emulate. So they put in $85 million in 1 month.
Right.
3 months later, they get back $200 million or so. Pretty good return for them.
Yeah.
And so...
And that was led by DFJ Growth. So they were really great to work with, too.
Looking back on this journey as an entrepreneur, what do you think the things you focused on correctly? And then obviously the follow-up to that is, what are the things that looking back on it you would say, gosh, I should have course corrected quicker and faster and leaned into
Right.
X?
Well, I think just to continue on the financial theme, the reason why we raise so much money is because, I'm not actually a believer in the lean startup idea once you kind of get some traction. So I believe that, when you're in the early stages, the very experimental, creative stage, it's good to be very lean, have a small team. You're throwing spaghetti against the wall, seeing what sticks. But once something sticks, I believe that you have to basically pour as much like gasoline on that fire as fast as you can, because people are going to copy it. You saw that, Mark Benioff was on stage. He saw us launch, and he's like, "That's a good idea. I want to, we need to learn from that." So you've got to, when something actually sticks, and it's rare that it happens, you've got to move as quickly as possible. And part of that's the reason why we kept raising money. We were like, we got to raise as much money as possible. We got to grow as quickly as possible. We got to expand the sales operation as much as possible. So, we went from lean to fat really quickly, and that I think you got to do that if you have something that's working.
And I'm assuming when you see Mark Benioff putting an ad in the Wall Street Journal every day for Chatter, when I saw that immediately said to me, wow, obviously Yammer is a very sustainable idea if Benioff is putting an ad in the Journal every day. As an entrepreneur, when you wake up, somebody as talented as Benioff is,
right,
decides he wants to be in your space, and he's putting an ad in the Wall Street Journal every day, what does that do to your management team? Do they all of a sudden panic and go, oh my God? And how do you calm them down?
Right. Well, first of all, it is tremendous validation, and I think at the end of the day, the way that Salesforce implemented their product was different enough that than the way we did it, but it was still something to obviously be pretty concerned about, and you have to use that to motivate your team and to get them to move faster. I mean, for sure.
You wrote a piece on Facebook. It was kind of a throwaway piece that, I don't know if it was written on a Saturday night or a Sunday night or something, just kind of off the cuff, and it wasn't published anywhere, but it was something to the effect that, the age of startups is going to get much more difficult because these big companies are getting so effective at launching new products. What was your thesis there? Because you got a very strong reaction.
Right.
I saw Mark Andreessen, came in hard to counter you.
Right.
What was the thinking there?
Well, I guess one way to put it would be no entrepreneur wants to create a product that's just a feature of something else, right? You want to create a product that can be a company, And the difference that I see now between, when I first got in the business and, 1999, I'm like the old man now, it's like 1999 with PayPal, is that you do have these huge internet companies, and I mentioned, 5 of them. So, there's Google, Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, right? And they've got so much surface area to their products that it's kind of easier than ever before for them to kind of featureize you, right? So that's the bad news. But I think there's a lot of good news as well, which is that, and this is, Andreessen's point, software is eating the world. So there's more spaces than ever before for software to go. And we're seeing entire industries that were never technology industries all of a sudden be disrupted. So, 2 years ago, who would have thought that the taxi cab industry would be an internet business? And now it is, thanks to Uber. Another company I invested in called House is disrupting the market for home remodeling and design. So I love these businesses that are transforming non-tech industries into tech industries. And so I think there's just tons of opportunity for entrepreneurs to do stuff like that. And so I don't want to seem pessimistic. I'm very optimistic about that. But I do think you got to watch out for this, this sort of the 4 or 5 horsemen product surface area type problem.
And as an entrepreneur, how do you do it? How do you actually navigate that?
Right.
I guess
well, part of it is the initial idea selection. I think you choose a space that's kind of as far removed from what they're doing. I mean, to start with, try not to pick an idea that's going to be on their 2-year product roadmap, or something you can guess is pretty obviously on their near-term product roadmap. I think the other thing you have to do is, the reality is that when you first launch, your product is easy to copy. And when we first launched Yammer, it was easy to copy.
It was a 3-month-old product.
Well, we developed the initial version in 3 months. We dog fooded for 6 months. So basically, it had been in development for 9 months. okay? But it had been in 9 months with a team of, a handful of people, less than 15 people. So the reality is a big company, if they had moved fast enough, could have crushed us. So what we did is like I told you before, we moved as quickly as possible to add depth to our product, surface area to the product, so that 2 years later, by the time that Salesforce or whoever was trying to do those Super Bowl commercials, like it wasn't the same product anymore. They had basically copied our product circa 2008. We were on to Yammer 2010, and the difference was big enough that people in the market could see it. And so that's part of it is the initial idea selection combined with just you got to move maniacally to basically when it's working to make sure that people can't just copy you easily.
So is it easier today or harder today? I mean, you've been in the business for a long time. Entrepreneurship, we hear about the lower cost of starting a business, but what you're telling us is something completely different. Maybe lower to start, but when you do hit something, it's going to be $100 million in funding and ramming and jamming it, to scale. Is it harder or easier in your estimation?
I think it's gotten, on the whole, like especially if you look on a multi-decade time frame, it's gotten much, much easier. I mean, there's so much more infrastructure now in Silicon Valley. It's almost like these, Sand Hill Road is like this financing API that any entrepreneur can plug into. I was watching, I was lucky enough to kind of get an early screening of Ashton Kutcher's movie on Steve Jobs.
Right.
And, I loved it, by the way. I thought he did a great job. And the thing that really came across in that movie, they spent a lot of time focusing on the early days, like how Apple got founded with Jobs and Wozniak, and how they got Mike Markkula to write them their first check. And the negotiation was, Mike Markkula is like, all right, I'm going to give you $90,000. And Steve Jobs is like, okay, but I want a $300,000 valuation. And, it's like the values changed so much. And, and they show Jobs making hundreds of phone calls to land Markkula. It was so hard. It's almost like Steve Jobs was like this civil rights pioneer for entrepreneurs who like made it so much easier for all the rest of us who came later. And so I just think it's so much easier on every level. There's so many resources that, we have conferences like this. There's the VC community is so much more developed. You've got websites and blogs that make knowledge transfer so much easier. So, I mean, look, we all have it way easier than the trailblazers who invented this industry, like the Jobses and the Gateses.
What do you think it means for America as a country, internally, how society does seem to be changing, where the network effect is hitting people in New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Seattle, other places, and just skyrocketing them in efficiency and also wealth creation, and then other areas are flatlined.
Right.
And then taking it out a step and looking at America versus the world, because I know you do think about the big picture.
Well, this is what's happening in tech is clearly the most optimistic thing happening in America. I mean, this is the economy of the future. I think the fact that it's spreading into all these other industries, that you now have this culture of entrepreneurship that, when I graduated from Stanford in 1994, political science was the most popular major, and today it's computer science. And that is like a total sea change in the way, when I graduated, I didn't even know that like entrepreneurship was an option. Now we got, these kids graduating from school and they've seen the social network and they want to be the next Mark Zuckerberg and they already know how to negotiate the valuation for their Series A, and I mean... Yeah,
they've had 3 term sheets before they got accepted to college.
Yeah. So, I think this is like the most positive thing happening in America, and it's the basis of American competitiveness in the world, and it's the basis of our future economy, the transitioning to this information economy from sort of an industrial economy.
Yeah, and what do you think our government has done over the last 10 years in terms of fostering it or not, or can it have any impact? I mean, we see the Obama administration and Silicon Valley, I mean, they seem to be perpetually at lunch together. If my path is any indication, I think Obama lives like, on University Avenue or something. You would think they would move the White House there. Is the government helping, hurting, or indifferent in this sort of regard? Can they even have an impact? When people talk about immigration, taxes, et cetera. What's your take on the government's role?
Well, I think there is a short list of stuff that Silicon Valley needs, like the immigration, the H-1B visas, making it way easier for us to keep and attract engineering talent globally, hugely important. We all know that. That's been on the short list for a long time. I think the whole crowdfunding legislation was on the Silicon Valley short list for a while. I think patent reform is another one where, that's really important.
How would you reform that patent? I mean, what would David Sachs's agenda be? You've been sued by patent trolls or no?
Yeah, I have. So, a patent troll is someone who hasn't created anything, but they've bought up some patent that, and who knows what it even means, because these things are written in this like legal gobbledygook. But then they sue you on the grounds that supposedly you've infringed their patent. And, I would say that I think there's a lot of ways to skin this cat. I mean, I think you could say that, if you haven't actually created the product, I mean, I'm not sure you should have standing to sue someone who actually has created a product. I mean, we know that, and I think everyone here knows that the hard part about being an entrepreneur is not like sitting in a room brainstorming an idea. It's actually like creating the thing.
Yes.
And if you didn't execute it, what grounds do you have to sue somebody who has? I mean, that's the thing that's really annoying. So I think that's one idea. I think another idea is that you shouldn't be able to sue someone for like an idea, like a feature idea. Like, we all know that some of these like crazy patents have been issued for like, advertising on a website,
Yeah.
like back in the days.
Downloading a video off the internet.
Yeah. So the idea for a feature shouldn't be patentable in my opinion, but the code should be protected. I don't believe in piracy. I think, but we have copyright protection for that. So, but I do think that it stands in the way of innovation if an idea for something can be owned by a company. That's just not what the patent system was set up to do.
And Nathan Myhrvold, considered, a very talented guy, and now considered the world's largest patent troll, is bringing inventors together, brilliant people, and saying brainstorm with lawyers in the room to then file it with no intention of doing it. And his claim is, well, the inventors deserve credit for inventing, and that's all we want is our credit.
Well, an inventor used to be somebody like Alexander Graham Bell or Thomas Edison, somebody who actually like created the thing, not sat in a room and talked about it.
Right. So the definition of inventor in that case is wildly optimistic.
Yeah.
Coming up with an idea.
Yeah. To invent, you actually have to create something. It's not about filing a piece of paper.
I've introduced, since you're an angel investor and I'm an angel investor, a lot of companies to you. I watch you evaluate their ideas pretty quickly. What do you think when you look at, I don't know how many angel investments you've done. Do you?
I'm not sure, like dozens, I guess. But
dozens, okay. Yeah. What is typically the thing that entrepreneurs lack? What is the thing they need to work on? Is there a theme that you see over and over again where you say, hey, if you do this, you're going to get there?
Well, I've kind of, there's four things that I think a startup entrepreneur, that I look for in an idea. And it's frequently the case that at least one of them is missing. And by the way, I think if you can just get to like 3 out of 4, I'd be happy enough to invest because you can usually figure out the last one. Let me just quickly run through them. So the first thing I look for is a product hook, right? It's a simple way to engage with the product that I can see people realistically, like it's a realistic user behavior. For Yammer, it was, what are you working on? We took that status update, adapted it for a business context, right? With Genie, it was creating a family tree by clicking arrows. And with PayPal, it was typing in someone's email address and a credit card. And they were all simple behaviors that, that I thought people could get hooked on, right? So that product hook is number one.
So you're calling it a product hook, but it's a behavior that people do. It's an atom of behavior that builds your product.
It's a starting point because, if you don't have a simple interaction to get people started, layering on a whole bunch of other features, like power user features, that's not going to help you. So it's all about getting that. It's the wedge, it's the onboard, it's the bootstrap. It's just that little thing that gets the whole thing moving. And it has to be a believable interaction. Now, if they've already launched the product, you can see it in their numbers. But if they haven't launched the product, it just has to be a simple product hook. Again, that's just what I call it, that I believe that a typical user will engage in. So that would be like number one, okay? Number two is they're solving some market problem that actually exists, or there's some need for this thing in the abstract, right? And the product hook and the market need are kind of opposite ways to come at it. Frequently, I'll see an entrepreneur start with the market need, and they'll be exactly right about that. They'll point to some market that's like horribly broken and needs a solution, but they won't have productized it in a way that I believe any user will actually interact with. And then sometimes you'll get a product that's got a hook, but they're kind of groping towards what the real problem is they're solving. And I'd almost rather invest in that, because I take that
You take the hook, not the market.
I take the traction and believe you can grope towards the market need and figure out the business model, right?
Because that shows the person has the ability to make a good hook.
I think the hook is harder than identifying a market need, basically.
I mean, anybody can identify a market need. You just look around you and say, what sucks?
Right. That's true, but sometimes you have to iterate towards what that is. Like, it wasn't probably clear, like, day one when Twitter launched, or even Facebook, like how it would get to be a business. But
they had a good hook.
Yeah, they had a great hook. So, and then
we got the hook, we got the market.
Right. The third is a distribution model.
How does it spread?
How does it spread? And distribution is probably the single hardest component, I think, of creating a startup. What I look for is virality. I want the users to recruit other users on some level. All the products that I've been involved in building, PayPal, Genie, Yammer, have all been viral on some level. And the basic problem is you can build something great, but it's a big internet out there. How are people going to find it? So you've got to figure that out. And sales is prohibitively expensive for most startups. Marketing, like advertising, prohibitively expensive. So how are you going to do it? It's actually a really difficult problem. And so that's one of the really big things I look for.
And what was the fourth?
The fourth is what I would describe as non-copyability. So, so we talked about, okay, you launch something, you throw the spade against the wall, it sticks, great. Now, why isn't somebody else just going to copy it and commoditize you? And the thing about software is it's very easy to copy, right? I don't mean pirate. I'm not saying someone has to steal your code. All they got to do is look at what you do, and they're like, oh, I can build this. So if other people are going to be building it, how are you going to, what makes your product fundamentally non-copyable? And the best is a network effect, right? It's like, eBay, like a marketplace type effect, or a Metcalfe's Law type thing like Facebook. Or it could just be, if your first mover advantage is strong enough, I'll go back to Salesforce. I'm not sure that Salesforce has a network effect per se, but Mark Benioff saw the cloud so much earlier. He had like a multi-year head start. And I think, so the first mover can be very big as well.
Right, and then once people are trained up on the product and they know how to use Salesforce, when they go to the next company and that person then is already trained in Salesforce, it was like the old days when somebody had used Goldmine or whatever the CRM software was. They're going to be like, oh, where's Goldmine? Where's Salesforce? Or I know Excel. Why don't you have Excel?
Right.
They become your product evangelists.
Yeah, so you can build a community that spreads your product. There's sort of there's sort of complementary network effects where, like, if all the salespeople learn how to use your product, then it becomes your product can become a standard or something like that. So you want to have some basis for believing that the market. That you can win the market and that it won't just erode to a bunch of copycats.
If you could own either of the following two companies, which one would it be and why? Twitter or YouTube?
Well, YouTube's owned by
No, I'm
Google
just,
now.
if you could.
Okay.
Hypothetical.
Gosh, those are both super attractive businesses.
Right.
I invested in Twitter last year. I'm super bullish on that.
Right.
And if I could invest in YouTube, I guess I would.
So that was too close to call?
That one's too close to call, yeah.
Facebook or Twitter? Which one is going to be more important? Which one would you rather own today? A share of one, a share of another?
Right. Well, I think they're both important, but what I would say is on a relative pricing basis, one of the reasons I bought Twitter last year is that the gap between Facebook's valuation and Twitter's was 8-1. So if you look at Facebook on a fully diluted basis, it's about $80 billion valuation. Twitter secondary shares are about 10, and I'm not sure exactly what the spread should be, but I think 8x is way too great. Maybe Facebook should be 2 to 3 times as valuable as Twitter.
So the catch-up will happen.
I think that gap will compress.
What are your thoughts on?
And just the reason is,
Yeah.
just to complete the thought, I basically think that what happened over the last few years is that Twitter peeled away the value of public sharing that could have or should have or maybe at one point belonged to Facebook. But, you know, when I was watching the Super Bowl, and I toggled between my Twitter feed and my Facebook feed, and, you know, the Twitter feed was much more engaging. It was like real time, everyone was talking about the Super Bowl and the halftime disaster or whatever.
Yeah.
And I love Facebook too. It's the way that I stay in touch with my family and friends. But Twitter has really peeled away that public sharing, and I just think it's, you know, incredibly valuable.
What are your thoughts on Google today? Larry Page, Sergey, it seems to hit an all-time high. Like every week it seems to be hitting an all-time high. Why is Google doing so well?
Well, obviously it starts with their sort of their advertising system. Their ad platform is a very sort of core, robust business model. But they seem to just have moved on to this incredibly ambitious phase where they're getting their fingers into everything and enough other stuff is working. You know, one of the I'd say that for Google's first maybe 10 years or so, the salutary myth that they promoted was this idea that that they really prospered when they kicked people off of Google to your site as quickly as possible. And so Google would be, it's sort of this whole don't be evil. They're going to be this like very unbiased navigation system for the web. And I think over the last few years, that's really changed. And now, you know, they're basically,
they want everything.
They want everything.
Yeah, Google take
They want everything.
Yeah, I've been there. Well, I mean, it's like sports scores,
Right.
you know, ticketing, movie times, what Zagat. I mean, obviously the YouTube purchase.
Right.
They've moved organic search halfway down the page.
Right.
I mean, being number one in a search ranking in organic results means nothing today if the top of the fold is Google services and products.
Yeah, and so they've gotten, you know, very aggressive about branching out to new areas and capturing a lot of the value for themselves. And then you got to give them credit for, like you said, the YouTube acquisition, the Android acquisition. Those are probably two of the most successful tech acquisitions in the last decade.
Well, and speaking of Microsoft, Skype was a pretty great one as well.
Yeah.
Skype and Yammer seem to be the
Right.
corollaries people are having with Microsoft.
Yeah, so Microsoft's done a great job as well.
If you do say so yourself.
Well, yeah.
Well, I mean, they did, but Skype, yes. But
Yeah.
And Yammer is obviously close second to that in terms of the scope. What do you think now that you're inside of Microsoft? I recently got Windows 8. I got a Windows 8 phone, tablet, and a laptop, and I started playing with it. I was pretty impressed with how awesome the Windows 8 interface is, and that it's the same app store and same interface and same cloud across all three. Have people counted Microsoft out a little bit too soon?
Well, you know, first let me just set up the appropriate disclaimers.
Yes, of course. You don't speak for Microsoft.
I don't speak for Microsoft. I'm just here. These are my own views, and I'm not even in the Microsoft Office division is the division that acquired Yammer.
Right.
So, you know, I can talk maybe with, you know, a little bit more of an insider's perspective about Office. I have none of that at all with respect to Windows, not part of that division. I would say that, you know, the thing that's very innovative about, again, just as a bystander, about Windows 8 is that it is a single operating system across all devices. And I think that's clearly the right direction. And it'll be really interesting to see what the other guys do about that.
Yeah, and moving on to Apple, stock price got crushed recently. iPhone orders, people are wondering, hey, maybe the iPhone's best days are behind it.
Right.
What's your take on that with the iPhone? I mean, do you feel like Android has caught up and has parity now? I mean, how many people here are iPhone users? And then how many are Android users? Wow, that is almost, it felt like 60-40?
Yeah. Yeah, looks like it. So.
Okay, let's do 2 years ago. 2 years ago, how many people were iPhone users? 2 years ago, how many people were Android users? Wow, that's significant because just for the people who are watching on the live stream, it was 60%, 40% iPhone to Android today, but 2 years ago, that looked like what, 80-20 to you? Mm-hmm. Maybe 70, about 80-20 2 years ago, so that's a big switch.
Yeah. Well, I think you wrote a great blog about this. I think that it seems like Apple is just repeating the same mistakes it made in the 90s where, you know, they're overly concerned with maintaining margins on the hardware. And so as a result, they haven't, you know, part of it's a business model problem, right? I mean, they make money off the hardware, not the software. And so they're being undercut essentially by a product that's, or a union, which is, you know, Google, Samsung, that is a cheaper product. And, you know, I think they should probably care less about margins and more about market share. But, you know, and I think you made a similar point, and I think they probably have to try, you know, there's a great article on TechCrunch the other day there was a fancy designer who created a phablet for Apple. I don't know if you guys saw that. It was some of the best fantasy design I've seen. And, you know, it's one thing when Steve Jobs says, look, this is our product line, you know, it's like Moses coming down from the mountain, and it's like the Ten Commandments. But, you know, now that they're sort of on the next stage, I think it probably would make sense to be a little bit more experimental, and you know, clearly people want these like super large devices.
Yeah, the Note 2 is becoming addicting. I have one, and this sort of phablet is a terrible, ridiculous name to say.
Yeah.
You look so weird when you put that to your head. I don't know if anybody with a Note 2, can you just put it to your head for a second and we can see how ridiculous you look? I mean, I don't know how to, look, there it is.
But people,
that was an iPad mini, Owen. Business Insider.
Yeah.
I just like the fact that Business Insider's in the front row and they're just getting dogged every like 2 panels.
Yeah, but I mean, look, if you want me to play fantasy, you know,
baseball?
armchair CEO, you know, I think Apple should consider doing some radical stuff like licensing the operating system, you know, or coming out with a phablet, or you know, having a more complete product line.
Let's talk about the best CEOs in the business. I'll leave Ballmer aside because I don't want to get you in trouble with Microsoft. But Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Zuckerberg, rank them.
Gosh, that's
why?
really hard. But I will give Steve a plug. You know, he was really Bill Gates' de facto co-founder in the company. I don't think he gets enough credit for that. I mean, he joined like when there were less than 30 employees, and was, you know, Gates' partner throughout the whole growth of Microsoft. And
survived a couple of decades, and every 5 years it was the death of Microsoft, and it just has never happened. So he does get credit for something.
Well, and the financial results of the company over the last 10 years have been phenomenal. I mean, they've basically grown revenue from like 30 billion to 75 billion, and they've got, you know, they spin out like 30 billion a year of profits. So, you know, it's been certainly by the numbers a very successful tenure. On to the guys you mentioned.
Because I would say pound for, I should probably put Larry Page in there, I don't know.
They all obviously they're all great CEOs in different ways, and you know, and they're all founder CEOs. They have a special, you know, insight into their business.
So let's just go through each one. You just tell me what you think if we're not going to rank them. Bezos.
Right.
What do you think? Amazon, what they've done? Just Amazon and Bezos in general. Go.
Right. I guess what's impressive about them is again just 10 years ago they were just trying to get the basic e-commerce business, the book business to work, and now they've been able to really expand the surface area of what they do. So now, you know, they've got Amazon Web Services. They've basically going into every category of e-commerce. You know, they've got their own device. It's you know, it's impressive that they've been able to expand like that.
What do you think when you see them ship $100 million to make movies, or, you know, they have Amazon Studios now, and you did a film, you did Thank You for Smoking, which won Sundance, correct? Did it win Sundance, or what did it win?
Something like,
it won a couple of awards.
We got nominated for Golden Globe and Independent Spirit Award, and
when you see Amazon just shipping, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars into original content creation, what do you think? Good move or pocket change? What's the thinking there?
Well, you know, I would say it's a horrible thing for a startup to do, but when you get to Amazon size and you're a $100 billion company, you can kind of take flyers like that. And so, you know, in general, I'm pretty skeptical of the content creation business, but they have the ability to kind of place bets like that. And so, you know, I think, again, when you're running a company that big, you now have the luxury of not having to worry about like dying every day the way that, you know, you do when you're a startup, like, you know, all of us are kind of running, and you can do things that you can place a bunch of different bets knowing that some of them aren't necessarily going to work out.
Take some moonshots.
Yeah.
Larry Page.
Right.
Speaking of moonshots, self-driving cars, Google Glass, Larry and Sergey, what do you think?
Right. I mean, it's the same. It's sort of the same analysis, that the reason why we're talking about these guys is they've been able to really expand the surface area of what they do.
What does Marissa got to do at Yahoo to make it turn around? Can it be done?
Right. In general, I don't believe that tech turnarounds are possible, and just in general, because once the ice has melted under your feet, strategically, it's just too hard to fix it. The tech markets move so quickly that by the time you realize that you've lost your product market fit, it's just like almost impossible to fix it. The only turnaround story that we all talk about that I know of in the tech industry is Jobs with Apple, and he was kind of one of a kind. So honestly, like those turnaround situations are incredibly tough. Now, with respect to Yahoo specifically, I like what I've heard Marissa say so far. This idea of daily habits, that it's a great way to recognize what Yahoo has historically been very good at and align it with where the market is today. So I like what I'm hearing so far about that, and we'll just have to see kind of how it goes.
When she cut the telecommuting thing,
yeah,
the 350 people, and supposedly like not a lot of VPN activity.
Right.
Do you think she was getting overly criticized because she's a female founder maybe, or that any CEO would have gotten that criticism of letting, because it is such a small fraction of the workforce. Why did that become such a brouhaha?
Well, I don't know that she was necessarily treated differently than other CEOs would be, but I would say I would defend that decision. I mean, I like her decision a lot.
Why?
Well, because, like you said, they did the data, and they're seeing all these people working from home, and they're never logging in, and no one can tell what they do. So
pretty easy decision.
It's a pretty easy decision. I mean, what is everyone complaining about? I mean, it's unbelievable to me. And to be honest, in the past, the companies I've been involved in, we've absolutely had work from home situations, but they've been situations, not policies. It's always been negotiated with the person. And we know them, and we trust them, and we talk about how this is going to work. It's not just this idea that, hey, I don't have to ever come into work. I mean, that's a crazy policy.
It's kind of insane, yes.
It's insane. And, it's not just about your productivity. It's about, collaborating and working with others. What if somebody else at the office needs to talk to you about something? It's nice for people to be able to just swing by your desk,
have a cup of coffee
sometime, or happen to see you in the cafeteria and you guys have lunch. It's not just about your productivity at home. It's also about being able to collaborate with your coworkers at the office. And so even though Yammer is a product that helps people collaborate sort of virtually, I still believe in the benefits of being in person in the same office.
You worked with Elon Musk at PayPal.
Right.
What do you think of what he's accomplished in the last 3 or 4 years?
I mean, it's obviously unbelievable. I mean, he's probably the world's best applied engineer. I don't know anybody else who could design a reusable rocket and a battery-powered car and do it at the same time.
Yeah.
That would be enough to kill most people. And so it's just, it's an unbelievable design feat. It's an unbelievable feat of I think, leadership to convince the investors that he needed a massive amount of investment, and he needed to create huge teams to do that. So being able to pull all of that together, and then finally, he basically, risked his whole net worth on his ventures. So
he went broke.
Yeah, basically. Well, I mean,
he's publicly said he went broke, and he was living off of loans from friends.
Yeah. So I think of the list you mentioned, I mean, I think he's the gutsiest. He's got to be the gutsiest entrepreneur we know.
Hands down.
Hands down.
And the best applied engineer that we know.
Yeah.
Interesting. What's next for David Sachs? You obviously are working at Microsoft. Are you the next CEO of Microsoft? Am I sitting here with the next bomber? Or did they?
No,
I mean, at some point in the next 10 years he'll retire. Is that something you consider?
You know what? I'm just focused on Yammer right now, and that's flattering that you would say that. But
Well, I mean, I think that a lot of us think it. Like you see someone like you from the Valley, you feel like the heir to Gates and to Ballmer.
There's a lot of people who have much more important jobs than I do at Microsoft. I mean, I report to the guy who reports to the guy who reports to Ballmer. So it's I don't. But look, I'm honestly not even thinking about that. I'm really happy doing what I'm doing, building Yammer, and just looking forward to keep doing that for a while.
So in closing, you've had a pretty good run here at the launch conference.
Right.
And we were talking backstage, and you had
Yeah.
this incredible idea. Let's hear it.
Well, I mean, the reality is there's so much interesting stuff going on out there. I mean, in the demo pit, on stage here. I mean, there's more than, any human can keep track of except for you, I think. You're like the only one who can keep track of all this activity.
Right.
So I said to you is, why don't you pick, say, the top 5 of these launch conference startups every year, and I'll invest, I'll make an angel investment, say like $50,000 each. So we'll do a $250,000 little mini fund. And you just pick the winners, and I'm behind them.
Wow. Big round of applause. You've just seen the formation on stage of the launch fund, I guess we'll call it. And
Yeah.
so now every...
And just, we'll give the launch conference a 20% carry like a VC would take, so
Yes.
that if you pick the winner, you pick well,
So if
the
we
money
had
will
done
go into
that,
the conference.
let's put this in perspective.
Yeah.
If the launch fund had existed with Yammer, at the
Right.
time Yammer launched, what was the valuation approximately? 100 million?
When Yammer launched? No, I mean, we fought to get we raised, on the heels of winning the conference, we raised $5 million at a 20 post, so 15 pre.
So if we had put 50,000 in,
Right.
it would have grown 50x?
We would have made about I think the Series A guys made about 60x.
60 times
Yeah.
50.
So basically it went from 20 million to 1.2 billion.
What would $50,000?
Oh, 50,000 times 60 would be, you're having a little trouble with the math? That'd be 3 million. You would have gone from 50,000 to 3 million.
So that's about three times. I'm just letting you know the significance of this. That's 3 times the budget. This event cost $1 million to put on. Mm-hmm. So what you've just done is inevitably we will have another Yammer. I mean, we hope, but if we even had half of another Yammer
Right.
every year or every other year, it would pay for the entire budget of the conference 2 or 3 times over.
Yeah. Good. Let's do it. Pick one. Let's do
All
it.
right, let's hear it for David Sachs and the creation on stage of the Launch Fund. David Sachs, it's been an honor to have been with you from the rehearsals and to have become your friend over the years and lost a shit ton of money to you playing poker and being absolute.
Maybe I can fund the launch fund with.
Yes, with the losses.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I mean, and just so people know, Chamath, we talked yesterday about Chamath being probably the best, one of the best players in the group. It's pretty much neck and neck between the two of you. Who's the better poker player, you or Chamath?
Probably, I hate to say it. I can't even say it.
You have to say, be objective.
Honestly, it's, I think we both know it's Chamath, but
you can't
like,
say it.
Saying it's like so hard, yeah.
Because then you have to play him.
Yeah, I gotta play him and he's gonna be really obnoxious about it.
Right, so we won't say it, but we all know it. The most successful entrepreneur in the history of the Launch Conference, David Sachs.
All right, thanks, Jason. All right.
Wow, extraordinary.
Yeah.
Watch your step.
Alrighty.
Okay.